I stood in front of Lincoln High's main entrance, watching students pour through the gates like they always had. But this time, something was different. This time, I knew exactly what was coming. The morning sun hit the brick facade the same way it did on September 4th, 2019. The first day of my sophomore year. Except it wasn't supposed to be 2019 anymore. In my mind, in my bones, in every cell that remembered, I was 28 years old. I had already lived this life once, and I had lived it terribly wrong. My phone buzzed. I already knew who it was before I looked. "Emily, wait up, I need to talk to you." Ryan Mitchell, the boy who would destroy me, the boy I had loved so desperately that I gave up everything, my dreams, my family, my self-respect, just to keep him. The boy who would take it all and leave me with nothing but regrets and a mountain of debt by the time I turned 26. But he didn't know that I knew. He didn't know that I had already seen the ending. I turned off my phone without responding and walked through those doors alone. In my first life, I had been so naive. So painfully, destructively naive. I was 15 when Ryan first approached me in the cafeteria, all charm and confidence, with that crooked smile that made my heart skip. He was a senior, captain of the basketball team, and somehow, impossibly, he wanted me. Plain Emily Hart from the scholarship program, whose mother worked double shifts at the hospital, and whose father had left when she was 8. He made me feel special, chosen, seen. What I didn't see was how carefully he isolated me, how he slowly convinced me that my best friend Jessica was jealous, how he made me feel guilty for spending time with my mother, how he needed me to skip class to watch his games, to help him with his papers, to be there whenever he called. "If you really loved me, you'd understand," he used to say. And I did love him. I loved him so much that I failed my AP classes. I loved him so much that I turned down the scholarship to Boston University, the one I'd worked 3 years to earn. I loved him so much that when he asked me to take out student loans in my name to help fund his business ventures, I did it without question. By the time I was 21, I was $70,000 in debt. He had moved to California with someone else, someone whose family had money, someone who could actually help his career. The last time I saw him, he looked at me with something close to pity and said, "You were too dependent, Emily. It was exhausting." I spent the next 5 years barely surviving, working 3 jobs, living in a studio apartment with broken heating, watching my mother's health decline because I couldn't afford to help her, wondering where it all went wrong. The breaking point came when I was 26. My mother had her first heart attack. I was working the night shift at a diner, couldn't afford to take time off, couldn't afford the mounting medical bills. The stress was crushing me from all sides. I had applied to graduate school twice, trying to restart my education, but the debt made it impossible. I couldn't get approved for more loans. I couldn't save enough to pay out of pocket. Every door I tried to open was locked because of choices I'd made when I was 15 years old. One night, walking home from my 3rd job in the rain, I stopped in the middle of the street and just stood there. I was so tired, so completely exhausted by the weight of a life I had destroyed before I was old enough to understand what I was doing. I didn't see the car until it was too late. The impact felt distant, almost peaceful. And then there was darkness, deep, complete darkness that seemed to stretch forever. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at my childhood bedroom ceiling, the same faded crack shaped like a tree branch that I used to trace with my eyes before falling asleep. My body felt different, lighter, younger. I sat up and saw my hands. 15-year-old hands. No calluses from years of manual labour, no scars from that time I'd burned myself at the restaurant. My phone, a phone I hadn't owned in 13 years, showed the date, September 3rd, 2019, the day before everything went wrong. I didn't cry, I didn't panic. I sat there in absolute silence, absorbing the impossible reality of what had happened. Somehow, some way, I had been given a second chance. Not just to relive my life, but to remake it entirely. And I knew, with crystalline clarity, exactly what I needed to do. I needed to reject Ryan Mitchell before he ever got his hooks in me. I didn't tell anyone about the rebirth. How could I? They would think I was insane. But every moment confirmed it was real. The same faded crack in my bedroom ceiling, my mother's voice calling me down for breakfast with the exact same inflection, even the news playing on the TV about events I had already seen unfold. But this time, I wasn't the same girl. This time, I knew exactly what mistakes not to make. That first morning, I came downstairs and hugged my mother so tightly she laughed in surprise. "What's gotten into you?" she asked, but her eyes were warm. "Nothing, Mum. I just love you." She was so young in this timeline. Only 42, her hair barely touched with grey, her face unlined by the stress I would later cause her. In my previous life, I had taken her for granted, pushed her away, blamed her for not understanding my relationship with Ryan. I had broken her heart over and over. Not this time. "I've been thinking about my future," I told her over breakfast. "About college, about what I really want." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You have such a bright future ahead of you." If only she knew how right she was. This time, I would make sure of it. The first test came during lunch on that first day. Ryan approached me as I sat with Jessica just like he had before. Same smile, same opening line. "Emily Hart, right, I've seen you around. You're in Mrs. Patterson's English class?" In my first life, I had blushed, stammered, and fallen for him immediately. I had looked into those green eyes and seen my future. Now, I just saw a manipulator who wasn't even that good at it once you knew the tricks. "I am," I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't smile, I didn't lean forward, I didn't give him anything to work with. "I was thinking maybe you could help me with my essay on Gatsby. I heard you're really smart." He leaned against the table, trying to create intimacy through proximity. I recognized the move now, the way he positioned himself to make refusing feel rude, to make me feel special for being needed. Jessica was already watching, uncertain, the way she had been before when she tried to warn me and I wouldn't listen. "I'm sure your English teacher can help you during office hours," I said calmly. "That's what they're there for." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe annoyance. But he recovered quickly. "Come on, don't be like that. I just thought we could grab coffee, get to know each other." "I have plans," I interrupted. "Thanks anyway." I turned back to Jessica, dismissing him completely. It felt powerful. It felt like breathing after years underwater. He stood there for another moment, clearly not used to this response, then walked away with a confused expression. Jessica stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Did you just turn down Ryan Mitchell?" "Yes," I said simply. "I did. But everyone says he's interested in you. That's like a huge deal. He's a senior, he's popular. I don't care what everyone says." I met her eyes steadily. "I know what I want, and that's not it." "What do you want?" "To get into a great college, to make my mum proud, to build a life that's actually mine." I took a breath. "And I want to keep you as my friend, Jess. You're important to me." She blinked, surprised by the sincerity. In my first life, I had let Ryan drive a wedge between us within 3 weeks. She had tried to warn me about him, and I had accused her of being jealous. We hadn't spoken again until years later when I tried to apologise. And by then, it was too late. The friendship was dead. Not this time. This time, I was going to value the people who actually cared about me. "Of course we're friends," Jessica said, but she looked touched. "Always." I spent that first week rebuilding my foundation carefully and deliberately. I went to every class and sat in the front row. I took notes like my life depended on it, because it did. I volunteered answers. I stayed after class to ask thoughtful questions. I made sure every teacher knew my name and saw my dedication. I joined the academic decathlon team, which I'd been too busy with Ryan to do before. I started volunteering at the community centre on weekends, building a resume that would actually matter. I reached out to the guidance counsellor about scholarship opportunities and college preparation resources, and I watched. I watched Ryan try 3 more times to get my attention that first week, each attempt less charming than the last. I watched him move on to another girl, Catherine from the drama club, and begin the same pattern with her, the same compliments, the same requests for help, the same slow isolation. I felt a twinge of guilt, but reminded myself I couldn't save everyone. I could only save myself. And maybe, by saving myself, I could show others what refusing looked like. My mother noticed the change immediately. "You seem different lately," she said one evening as we did dishes together. "More focused, more determined." "I'm just thinking about my future," I told her, which was true in a way she couldn't possibly understand. "You've always been so smart, Em, but lately it's like you know exactly where you're going." "I do know, Mum." I dried a plate carefully. "I know exactly where I'm going, and I know exactly what I need to do to get there." She smiled and kissed my forehead, and I had to fight back tears because I knew exactly how many years I had left with her if I didn't change everything. In my first life, the stress of my failures and her overwork had led to that first heart attack when she was 52. Then another at 54. She had died at 56, worn down by a life that had been too hard for too long. I was going to prevent that. I was going to give her the life she deserved. I was going to make sure she could retire early, travel, rest. I was going to make sure my choices built her up instead of breaking her down. By October, I had straight A's across all my classes and a clear plan mapped out. Boston University was still my target. They had given me a full scholarship in my first timeline before I threw it away. But this time, I was also applying to Columbia, Princeton, Stanford, and Yale, schools I had been too afraid to dream about before, thinking I wasn't good enough. But I knew now that I was good enough. I had already proven I could handle the work. I just needed to not sabotage myself. That's when Ryan made his first real mistake. There was going to be a Halloween party at Tyler Brennan's house. Tyler, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in town. In my first life, Ryan had convinced me to skip the party to hang out with him alone at his house. That was the night he first isolated me from my entire social circle, making me choose between them and him, making me feel like I had to prove my love by abandoning everyone else. That was the night I stopped being Emily Hart and started being Ryan's girlfriend. Just Ryan's girlfriend. Nothing else. No other identity. No other purpose. This time, when Jessica asked if I wanted to go to the party, I said yes immediately. "Really?" She seemed genuinely shocked. I heard Ryan asked you to hang out that night." "Ryan doesn't make my decisions," I said firmly. "I do, and I want to go to the party with my friend." Jessica's whole face lit up. "This is going to be so fun. We can coordinate costumes. Actually, I was thinking about going as Rosalind Franklin. You know, the scientist who discovered the double helix structure of DNA but never got credit. That's really specific. I think it's important." And it was, because I had spent 13 years of my previous life being overlooked, being erased, being told my contributions didn't matter. I wasn't going to let that happen again. The party was exactly as I remembered. Too loud, too crowded, red plastic cups everywhere, bad music thumping through cheap speakers. But I wasn't there to drink. I wasn't there to make mistakes. I was there to be seen, to be social, to maintain the connections that would matter. Ryan was there too, in the corner with Catherine, but his eyes kept drifting to me. I could feel his attention like a physical weight, that same intense focus he had once turned on me completely. He wasn't used to not getting what he wanted. He was starting to obsess. I recognized the pattern because I had lived through it before, just from the other side. I ignored him completely. Instead, I talked with David Kim, a senior who was heading to MIT. I knew because in my previous timeline he had gone on to found a successful tech startup that had been acquired for millions. I talked with Mrs. Henderson, who chaperoned these events, and who I now remembered was on the scholarship committee for the state university system. I talked with Amanda Rodriguez, who was brilliant and funny, and who I had completely overlooked in my first life because Ryan had convinced me that other girls were competition, not potential friends. I made connections. I built bridges. I showed people who I really was. Not Ryan's potential girlfriend, but Emily Hart, scholar, future scientist, someone worth knowing for her own sake. Ryan approached me near the end of the night when I was getting a glass of water in the kitchen. "Can we talk?" His voice had an edge to it now. The charm was cracking, revealing something harder underneath. "I don't think we have anything to talk about." "Why are you being like this?" He actually seemed hurt, which would have devastated the old me, the 15-year-old me who wanted so badly to be loved. "I'm trying to get to know you. I'm trying to be nice." "No," I said quietly, making sure no one else could hear. "You're not trying to be nice. You're trying to control me. There's a difference." His expression darkened, the mask slipping further. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I looked directly into his eyes, and I let him see something he didn't expect. Certainty. Complete, unshakable certainty. "I know you're going to ask Catherine to skip class to help you with your college applications. I know you're going to tell her that her friends in the drama club don't really understand her. I know you're going to slowly convince her that she needs to choose between them and you. I know exactly what you are, Ryan." He stepped back like I'd physically pushed him. "You're crazy." "Maybe," I said calmly, "but I'm not your victim. And I never will be." I walked away, leaving him standing alone in that kitchen, and I felt his stare burning into my back. I had just made an enemy, but I had also drawn a line he couldn't cross. I had claimed my territory, my autonomy, my future, and it felt like freedom. November came with the first real challenge. My college applications were progressing perfectly. My SAT scores were better this time, 80 out of 1600, because I knew exactly what to study and exactly what tricks the test used. My essays were sharper because I was writing them with 13 years of additional life experience. My extracurriculars were building impressively. My teacher recommendations were glowing because I had been the model student for 3 solid months. But something else was happening. Ryan had started spreading rumours. "Did you hear Emily Hart rejected Ryan Mitchell like 5 times? Who does she think she is? I heard she's obsessed with him but trying to play hard to get. She's kind of stuck up, isn't she? Like, she barely talks to anyone anymore. She just focuses on school like she's better than everyone else." Ryan said she's crazy. Like, genuinely unstable. Said she told him she could predict the future or something. The whispers followed me through hallways. I heard them in bathrooms, in the cafeteria, in the parking lot. In my first life, I would have been destroyed by this kind of social pressure. I would have crumbled, apologised, tried to fix my reputation by doing exactly what people wanted, which meant giving Ryan another chance. Now, I understood something crucial. Reputation doesn't matter if you're not staying. I was gating out of this town. I was going to one of the best universities in the country. These people, these opinions, these petty high school dramas, none of them would matter in 2 years. Ryan's influence was limited to these 4 walls, this small world that I was preparing to leave behind forever. So I let him talk. I focused on my work. I let the rumours swirl around me like smoke, insubstantial and temporary. But Jessica was worried. People are saying things, Em. Maybe you should just, I don't know, talk to him. Clear the air. Your reputation is taking a hit. Let it, I said simply. Reputation is just other people's opinions. It doesn't change who I actually am or what I'm actually capable of. But people think. I don't care what people think. I care what colleges think. I care what scholarship committees think. I care what my teachers think. And none of them are listening to high school gossip. Jessica studied me for a long moment. You're different this year. Like, really different. More confident. I just figured out what actually matters, I said, which was true. I had figured it out by losing everything first. Still, the rumours escalated. By early December, the stories had grown more elaborate. Ryan was telling people I had threatened him, that I was stalking him, that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. It was absurd. But it was also working to turn social opinion against me. That's when I made my countermove. The Winter Showcase was coming up, an annual event where students could present projects, performances, or achievements to the school, invited parents, and community members, including college representatives and local business owners who sponsored scholarships. In my first life, I hadn't participated because Ryan had convinced me it was lame and not worth my time. That I didn't need to show off, that real success was quiet and private. He had been lying. Real success was visible. Real success was documented. Real success opened doors. This time, I had entered multiple categories. I submitted my academic decathlon competition results. Our team had placed third in regionals, and I had scored highest individually in mathematics and literature. I submitted my research project on renewable energy solutions for urban environments, and I submitted my early acceptance letter to Boston University, which had arrived 2 weeks before with a full scholarship. The showcase was held in the auditorium on a cold Wednesday evening. My mother was there in the front row, beaming with pride. Several of my teachers were there. Representatives from 3 different colleges were there, including a Columbia alumna who was scouting for promising students. Local business owners who sponsored scholarships filled the seats. Ryan was there too, slouched in the back with his friends. Catherine wasn't with him anymore. I had heard they'd broken up after a huge fight when she caught him texting another girl. The pattern never changed. Only the victims did. When my name was called for the academic achievement presentation, I walked to the stage calmly. The old Emily would have been terrified, shaking, afraid to take up space or draw attention. This Emily had already given presentations to boardrooms of executives in her previous life's various jobs. This Emily knew how to command a room. I spoke about the importance of academic excellence and long-term planning. I talked about how easy it is to get distracted by what seems important now, versus what will matter in 5 years, in 10 years, in the life you're building for yourself beyond these walls. I didn't mention Ryan by name. I didn't have to. Someone once told me that following my dreams was selfish, I said, looking out at the audience, letting my words carry weight. That if I really cared about them, I would sacrifice my goals to support theirs. That love meant putting myself second, third, last. But I learned something important. Real love, real friendship, real respect. None of those things ask you to destroy yourself. They build you up. They celebrate your success, not demand your failure. And anyone who asks you to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger isn't someone who deserves space in your life. My mother was crying. Mrs. Patterson, my English teacher, was nodding emphatically. Even Principal Morrison looked impressed, making notes on his programme. And Ryan? Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear. His face was red, his friends were shifting uncomfortably, and suddenly every eye in the room understood exactly what he had tried to do to me. More importantly, they understood that he had failed. I continued, talking about my acceptance to Boston University, my plans to study biochemistry, my goal of eventually attending medical school to research genetic diseases. I talked about the importance of having mentors and support systems. I thanked my mother, my teachers, and my friends for believing in me and pushing me to be better. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. After the presentations, the Columbia representative approached me. "Emily Hart, I'm Dr. Patricia Williams. I have to say, that was an impressive presentation. Have you considered applying to Columbia?" "Actually, I have. I submitted my application 2 weeks ago." Her eyebrows rose. "Excellent. I'll make a note to look for it. We're always looking for students with your kind of focus and determination. Would you be interested in discussing our biochemistry program?" We talked for 20 minutes. She gave me her card. She told me to reach out directly when I heard back about my application. That conversation would change everything. The whispers changed after that night. "Did you see Emily's speech? That was incredible. She got into Boston University with a full ride. That's amazing." I heard the Columbia rep talk to her for like half an hour. "Ryan Mitchell tried to date her? Man, he's an idiot. She's way too good for him." The social tide turned and Ryan found himself suddenly on the outside. His manipulation only worked in shadows, in private, in one-on-one situations where he could control the narrative. Once exposed to light, once his tactics were visible to everyone, they lost all power. He tried one last time in January. He found me in the library, working on my Stanford application. It was after school, and the library was nearly empty. Just me, the librarian, and a couple of freshmen, working on a group project in the corner. He looked different. Smaller somehow, less confident. The swagger was gone. "Emily, can we talk? Really talk?" I considered saying no. But I also remembered something important from my previous life, from all those therapy sessions I'd eventually attended when I was trying to rebuild myself. Closure doesn't come from other people. It comes from yourself, from knowing you've said what needed to be said. "What do you want, Ryan?" I wanted to apologize. He seemed genuine, which surprised me. I think I was wrong about a lot of things. About how I treated you, about the things I said. "You were," I agreed simply. "But that's not my problem anymore." "I know, Can I ask you something? That night at the party, you said you knew what I was going to do with Catherine, and you were right about everything. How did you know?" I looked at him for a long moment. This boy who had once been everything to me, who had ruined me so completely that it took dying and being reborn to escape him, who was now just a sad teenage boy facing consequences for the first time in his life. "Because I saw you clearly," I said. "Maybe for the first time, I saw you exactly as you were, not as I wanted you to be. I saw the pattern, I saw the manipulation, I saw what you do to people who care about you. Is there any chance we could—" "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "There isn't. And honestly, Ryan, I hope you figure yourself out. I hope you become someone better than who you are right now. I hope you learn that you can't build yourself up by tearing other people down. But that's your journey, not mine. I'm done being part of your story." He nodded slowly, accepting it. Then he left without another word. I never spoke to him again. Spring semester was a blur of acceptances. Columbia, accepted with a generous financial aid package. Princeton, accepted. Stanford, accepted with a partial scholarship. Boston University, accepted with a full ride. Yale, waitlisted, then accepted in March. I had my choice of the best schools in the country, the same schools that had once seemed impossible, like dreams too big for someone like me. I chose Columbia. New York felt right, far enough away to be a clean break from everything that had happened in my first life. big enough to offer endless opportunities, prestigious enough to open any door I might want to walk through later. And Dr. Williams had specifically reached out to encourage my application, telling me about research opportunities and mentorship programs. My mother cried happy tears this time when I told her my decision. "Columbia University," she whispered, holding the acceptance letter like it was made of gold. "My baby is going to Columbia." "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." I hugged her tight, breathing in her familiar scent, lavender and the hospital soap she used. "You're the one who made this possible. Everything I am, everything I'm going to be, it's because of you." "I'm so proud of you, baby. I always knew you were special. But this is beyond anything I imagined." In my first life, I had blamed my mother for not warning me strongly enough about Ryan, for not stopping me from ruining my life, for not understanding what I was going through. But now I understood. She had tried. She had warned me gently, carefully, trying not to push me away. I just hadn't been able to hear it through the noise of first love and teenage rebellion. This time I could give her what she deserved. A daughter who succeeded. A daughter who would eventually earn enough to help her retire early. A daughter who wouldn't break her heart or fill her life with worry and stress. Graduation came in June. I walked across that stage with honours. Valedictorian, actually, which I hadn't been in my first life. I gave a speech about resilience and self-determination and not letting anyone else define your worth. People actually listened. Ryan wasn't at graduation. I heard from Jessica that he had transferred schools mid-semester after some disciplinary issue involving another girl who had finally reported his behaviour. I didn't ask for details. He wasn't worth the mental energy. The summer before college, I worked 2 jobs, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. One at the community centre, helping kids with their homework and college preparation. One at a lab doing basic research assistant work that would look good on my resume. I spent my evenings with my mother and with friends, real friends, who I had maintained relationships with this time around. Jessica and I spent hours talking about our plans. She was going to study environmental science at UC Berkeley. We promised to stay in touch, and this time I knew we would. This time I valued the people who actually cared about me. "You know what I realised?" Jessica said one night as we sat on her roof watching stars, just like we used to when we were kids. "You completely changed this year. Like, you became this whole different person." "I just figured out what mattered," I said. "It's more than that. It's like you knew exactly what was going to happen and planned around it. Like you could see the future." I smiled at the irony. Maybe I did, in a way. That's impossible, though. Probably. I looked up at the stars, at the vast universe above us. Or maybe sometimes we just get a chance to do things right, and we have to be smart enough to take it. We laughed, and I felt something I hadn't felt in either lifetime until this moment. Genuine, complete peace. My first day at Columbia was nothing like my first day at the community college I had attended in my original timeline. The one I'd enrolled in at 22, desperate to restart my education but drowning in debt and working full-time. This campus was beautiful, sprawling, filled with brilliant people from all over the world. My dorm room in John Jay Hall had a view of the city. My roommate, Priya, was a computer science major from Singapore who spoke 3 languages and played violin. My classes were challenging in the best possible way. My professors were world-renowned researchers. My classmates were sharp, driven, passionate about learning. And I was free. Completely, totally free. No Ryan, no debt, no regrets, no weight of past mistakes crushing me. Just possibility stretching out in every direction. I threw myself into my studies with the focus of someone who knew exactly what she was working toward. I majored in biochemistry with a minor in psychology, the perfect combination for understanding how people and systems work, how to see patterns, how to protect yourself from manipulation, while building genuine connections. I joined clubs. I volunteered at a research lab studying genetic disorders. I interned at pharmaceutical companies during summers. I built a network of people who respected my mind, my work ethic, my contributions. Not people who wanted something from me, but people who saw me as an equal, a colleague, a friend. I called my mother every Sunday without fail. I sent money home when I could, not much at first, but enough to help with small things, enough to show her that her sacrifice was worth it. Sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I would think about my first life, about the years I wasted, about the version of Emily who died crossing that street, broken and alone and drowning in regret, about the mother I couldn't save in that timeline, who worked herself to death trying to support a daughter who had thrown away every opportunity. But I didn't grieve for that Emily. She had given me the greatest gift possible, the knowledge of what not to do, the clarity of hindsight, the wisdom that only comes from living through consequences. By my junior year, I had job offers from 3 major consulting firms who recruited from Columbia. By graduation, I had accepted a position at Goldman Sachs with a 6-figure starting salary, more money than I had ever dreamed of earning in my first life, where I never made more than $40,000 a year juggling multiple jobs. My mother cried again when I told her about the job offer. "You did it, baby. You really did it." "We did it," I corrected, holding her hands. "You and me, together. And, Mum, I want you to think about retiring. Seriously, I'm going to make enough to support both of us. You've worked hard enough for one lifetime." She protested at first, but I could see the hope in her eyes, the relief, the possibility of rest after decades of struggle. Within 2 years, she was retired at 54, healthy and happy, travelling to places she'd only dreamed about. Within 5 years, I had bought her a house, not a mansion, but a comfortable home with a garden where she could grow flowers and vegetables, where she could finally breathe. 5 years after my rebirth, I was back in my hometown for Thanksgiving. I walked past Lincoln High out of curiosity, remembering the girl I had been. Both versions of her. The one who destroyed herself for a boy who didn't deserve her, and the one who chose herself first. I saw Ryan coming out of the local grocery store where he worked as a manager. He looked tired, older than his 29 years. He was with a woman and a small child, living the small-town life he had once been so desperate to escape, the life he had tried to use me as a stepping stone away from. He saw me too, recognized me immediately. His eyes widened. I could have ignored him, could have walked past, could have pretended I didn't see him, but something made me stop. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was proof that I had won, not by destroying him, but by building something he could never touch. "Emily?" he said, uncertain, tentative. "Emily Hart?" "That's me," I smiled politely, professionally. The way you smile at someone who was once significant but is now just another person in your past. "I heard you did really well. Big job in New York, Goldman Sachs." "I've been fortunate," I said neutrally, not giving him anything real, not sharing my actual life with him. "Listen, He glanced at his family, then back at me. The woman was watching us, curious but not worried. I know I wasn't great in high school. I've thought about it a lot over the years, about how I treated people, how I treated you. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, really sorry. And here was the thing. He probably meant it. People grow, people change. Maybe he had become someone better. Maybe fatherhood had softened him. Maybe he'd finally learned that you can't build a life on other people's backs. But it didn't matter anymore. His growth, his change, his apology, none of it mattered to me, because I had long ago stopped giving him space in my head. "I appreciate that," I said simply. "I hope you're happy, Ryan. I really do." "Are you? Happy?" I thought about my life, my career trajectory, my apartment overlooking Central Park that I'd just moved into, the graduate degree in business administration I was pursuing part-time at Columbia, the relationships I'd built with people who respected and valued me, my mother's health and early retirement, the absolute absence of debt or regret or wondering what if. Yes, I said simply, truthfully. I am. He nodded, accepting that. We said polite goodbyes. I walked away and I didn't look back. That was the last time I ever saw Ryan Mitchell. 10 years after my rebirth, I stood in front of a different audience. Not high school students, but executives at a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company where I had just been promoted to Vice President of Research and Development at 35 years old, the youngest VP in the company's history. My mother was in the audience, older now, but healthy, radiant, wearing the pearl necklace I'd bought her for her 60th birthday. Jessica had flown in from San Francisco, where she worked for the EPA, making real differences in environmental policy. Priya had video called from Singapore, where she was running her own tech company. My life was full of people who lifted me up, challenged me, celebrated with me. During my acceptance speech, I thought about that moment in front of Lincoln High when I was 15 years old, knowing everything that was about to go wrong and having the power to change it. Someone once asked me what the key to success is. I told the room full of executives, board members, and colleagues. And I realised the answer is simple. Know your worth. Know what you're worth before anyone else tries to tell you what they think you're worth. Know what you're worth before you give it away for free. Know what you're worth and never, ever let anyone convince you to accept less. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about 15-year-old Emily, standing at those school gates, making the hardest choice of her life, choosing herself. Later, my mother hugged me tight in the hallway outside the conference room. I don't know what happened that September 10 years ago, she whispered against my hair, but you became someone extraordinary, someone who knew exactly who she was and never let anyone take that away. I held her close and smiled, breathing in her perfume. She wore expensive perfume now, the kind she used to admire in department stores, but never buy for herself. I just learned from my mistakes, Mom. That's all. I learned from my mistakes before I made them. She pulled back, studying my face with that knowing mother's look. Sometimes I think you're older than you should be, like you've lived more than one lifetime. Maybe I have, I said softly. In a way. She didn't press. She just kissed my forehead like she used to when I was little, and we went to celebrate with everyone who mattered. That night, alone in my apartment with the city lights glittering below, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the window. 35 years old in this timeline. 43 if you counted my first life. 2 lifetimes compressed into one body, one consciousness, one continuous thread of being. I thought about Ryan sometimes, but not with anger, not even with satisfaction at his ordinariness compared to my success, just with a distant kind of understanding. He was a chapter that I'd closed before it could be written, a path I'd seen clearly enough to avoid. The real victory wasn't in what happened to him. It was in what happened to me. I had saved my mother. I had built genuine friendships that lasted. I had created a career that fulfilled me intellectually and financially. I had learned to recognize manipulation and walk away from it. I had learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. Proud of you, Em. You're living proof that we can all rewrite our stories. If only she knew how literally true that was. I typed back, we just have to be brave enough to make different choices. The truth was, most people didn't need a magical rebirth to change their lives. They just needed to see clearly, to trust themselves, to refuse to accept less than they deserved. The rebirth had given me that clarity, But the work, the daily choice to be better, do better, choose better, that was all mine. Over the next few years, I started mentoring young women in STEM fields, especially those from backgrounds like mine. Scholarship students, daughters of single mothers, girls who were told they should be grateful for any attention, any opportunity, any scrap of validation. I told them what I wish someone had told the first version of me. Your potential is not defined by who wants you, but by what you want for yourself. Some of them listened, some of them didn't. That was okay. Everyone has to find their own path, learn their own lessons. I just tried to make the road a little clearer for those walking behind me. My mother lived to see me turn 40, healthy, happy, surrounded by the family she'd built. She got to meet the man I eventually married, a researcher I met at a conference who respected my ambition and matched it with his own. She got to hold my daughter, the one I named Grace, because that's what my second chance had been. Grace, unearned and miraculous. I never told anyone the truth about the rebirth. How could I? It sounded impossible even to me sometimes, like a dream I'd had that felt more real than waking life. But I carried that knowledge with me always, that profound understanding that choices matter, that time is precious, that we shape our own destinies one decision at a time. Now, at 43 in this timeline, I sometimes look at old photographs from high school. There's one from the winter showcase, me standing at that podium with absolute certainty in my eyes. I look at that girl and I feel proud, not because of what she achieved, but because of what she refused to accept. She refused to be diminished. She refused to be controlled. She refused to sacrifice her future for someone else's present. And in that refusal, she found freedom. People ask me sometimes how I became so successful so young, how I made such perfect decisions, how I avoided all the pitfalls that trap so many talented women. I tell them what I can, that I learned to see manipulation for what it was, that I learned to value long-term goals over short-term validation, that I learned to recognize when someone was asking me to make myself smaller so they could feel bigger. And I learned that the right answer to that request is always no. But mostly, I learned this. You don't need to destroy your enemies. You don't need revenge. You just need to become so completely, authentically, undeniably yourself that their opinions become irrelevant. You need to build a life so full of genuine connection and purpose that the people who tried to tear you down simply fade into the background noise of your success. I didn't destroy Ryan Mitchell. I didn't ruin his life or seek vengeance. I simply outgrew him before he could reach me. I stepped around the trap before it could close. I chose a different path entirely. And that path led me here, to a life I built with my own hands, my own choices, my own refusal to be anything less than what I knew I could be. My victory was never about revenge. It was about becoming untouchable. Not because I was cold or distant, but because I knew my worth so completely that no manipulation could find purchase. Because I built something real, relationships, career, purpose, that couldn't be taken away or diminished by anyone else's opinion. I stand at my window now, watching the city lights, thinking about both versions of Emily Hart, the one who gave everything away and lost herself completely, and the one who chose herself first and found everything she'd been looking for. Both of them were me. Both of them taught me something essential. The girl I was taught me what not to do. The woman I became taught me what was possible. And somewhere in between those two lives, I learned the most important lesson. Your life is yours. Your choices are yours. Your future is yours to create. No one gets to take that from you unless you hand it to them. I never handed it over, not this time. And that made all the difference.